Hay race the first part of the story with intense dynamics, unexpected turns, and a powerful confrontation brewing. They'll make sure each part is long, engaging, and packed with emotions and twists. I came home early that day. I wasn't supposed to. My job kept me busy, and I rarely got time to just be home before sunset, but something told me to leave early. Maybe it was the headache that had been pounding at my skull all day. Maybe it was the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Or maybe it was just dumb luck. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, rubbing my temples, trying to push away the exhaustion. The house stood in front of me, looking exactly the same as it always did, clean, perfect, welcoming. But the air felt wrong, like I was about to step into a scene I wasn't supposed to see. I walked in quietly. The kids were at school, so the house was silent except for the faint hum of my wife's voice. She was on the phone, laughing. Not just laughing, giggling, the kind of giggle that's too sweet, too rehearsed. The kind I hadn't heard from her in years. I stayed just outside the hallway listening. I don't know why I didn't just walk in. Maybe deep down I already knew. Yeah, he finally got me the Tesla, she said, and my stomach twisted. I had spent months making sure that was perfect for her. A surprise. A moment that was supposed to be special. But the way she said it, like she had won something, it felt disgusting. Then she said something that made my blood turn to ice. Now I just need to take the house. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. For a second I thought I had misheard her, that my exhaustion was messing with my head. But then she laughed again, that same fake, syrupy giggle. Her mom's voice crackled through the speaker. Are you sure he won't suspect? Oh, please, my wife scoffed. He's clueless. He still thinks those kids are his. The world tilted. My vision blurred. My fingers dug into the wall to keep myself upright. Those kids. Not his kids. I felt like I had been punched straight through the chest. My knees nearly gave out. The memories flooded back, holding my son for the first time, kissing my daughter's forehead as she slept, all the sleepless nights, all the scraped knees, all the times I told myself that everything I did was for them. The woman I had built my life with, the woman I had sacrificed for, was not the woman I thought she was. And my children, God, my children, weren't even mine. Something inside me snapped. I stormed down the hallway, my heartbeat loud in my ears. She was lounging on the couch, legs stretched out, a glass of wine in her hand like she had already won. She turned just as I reached her, and for the first time in years I saw something flicker in her eyes, shock. She wasn't expecting me home. She wasn't expecting this. I grabbed the phone out of her hand and put it on speaker before she could react. Say that again, I said, my voice eerily calm. Too calm for the way my entire body was shaking. Her mom's voice came through, confused. What's going on? My wife tried to snatch the phone back, but I pulled away. Tell her, I said. Tell her I just heard everything. The color drained from her face. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She was stuck, cornered like a rat, and I wanted to hear her say it. Tell me, I said louder this time. Tell me how long you've been planning to screw me over. She blinked rapidly, and then, as if a switch flipped, her entire demeanor changed. The fake innocence disappeared, replaced by something colder, sharper. Don't be dramatic, she said, rolling her eyes. You weren't supposed to hear that. That was it. No apology, no panic, just a lazy, dismissive excuse. I had never wanted to hit someone in my life, but at that moment, my hands itched. I clenched my fists at my sides, forcing myself to stay in control. Whose kids are they? My voice barely came out. She sighed as if I was annoying her and took another sip of her wine. Does it matter? I swear, I saw red dot. I didn't know what scared me more, that she had said it so casually or that some part of me had already known the answer. I stared at her, at the woman I had spent the last decade of my life with, and I didn't recognize her anymore. She looked the same wavy brown hair, same green eyes that used to light up when she looked at me, but now they were cold, calculating. Does it matter? She repeated, like my entire world hadn't just been ripped apart. My chest felt tight, my breathing uneven. Does it matter? My voice was sharp, but it still didn't match the storm inside me. Are you serious right now? I raised them. I held them when they cried. I built a damn life for them. For you. She just sipped her wine again, eyes never leaving mine, like she was testing me. Like she wanted to see how much more I could take before I snapped. I wanted to scream, to break something, to force her to feel even a fraction of the pain she had just inflicted on me. Instead, I forced myself to focus, to breathe. I needed answers. Who? My voice came out like gravel. She tilted her head. Who what? You know what? I growled. Whose kids are they? For the first time, I saw hesitation flicker across her face. She placed the wine glass on the table, tapping her nails against the stem. Then she sighed, like she was bored of this conversation already. You don't want to know. I took a step closer. I do. She licked her lips, then gave me the kind of smile that made my stomach churn. Fine, she said. Since you're so desperate to know, it's more than one guy. I felt my body sway. More than one. She let the words sink in before adding, You're not the only one who's been working hard, babe. I've just been working on different things. I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. How long? She stretched her arms, like she was relaxing. Like this was nothing more than a conversation about what to have for dinner. I don't know, years? You were always so busy. It wasn't exactly hard. She shrugged. You never even questioned it. You were too busy playing the perfect husband, the perfect provider. A bitter laugh escaped me. And you were just, what? Laughing behind my back. She finally had the audacity to look slightly annoyed. Oh, don't act like I was so awful to you. You got the life you wanted. Family. A wife. Stability. I gave you that. She gave me that. I shook my head, my hands shaking. I can't believe I ever loved you. She smiled, like she had just won. See? That wasn't so hard to admit, was it? My body screamed at me to do something, to not let her get away with this. But I forced myself to stay in control. I wasn't about to explode, not yet. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, I hope you enjoyed the Tesla. That seemed to amuse her. Oh, I did. And I'll enjoy the house too. I chuckled. It was humorless empty. Yeah? We'll see about that. I pulled out my phone and started typing. Her smirk faltered. What are you doing? I didn't answer. I sent one message. Then another. Then another. My lawyer. A DNA testing lab. If she thought she had one, she had no idea what was coming next. I stood there, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my mind had never been clearer. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. She watched me, eyes narrowed, trying to read my next move. For years, I had been predictable, steady, reliable, the man who always fixed things. But that man was dead. What are you doing? She asked again, this time with a sharp edge to her voice. I looked up, meeting her gaze, and let a slow, cold smile spread across my face. You'll find out soon enough. Her confidence flickered for the first time. I saw it, the slightest tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers twitched against the arm of the couch. She wasn't afraid. Not yet. But she was uncomfortable. And I was going to make sure that feeling grew. I turned and walked away. Hey, she snapped. Where the hell are you going? I didn't answer. I grabbed my car keys and stepped outside. The night air hit me like a slap, but it didn't clear my head. Nothing would, not until I had torn down everything she had been building behind my back. I got in my car, hands still shaking, and drove. Not fast. Not recklessly. I needed control now more than ever. I didn't go to a bar. I didn't go to a friend's house. I went somewhere better. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of the best divorce lawyer in the city. I didn't care that it was late. I didn't care that his office was closed. I sent him a message, emergency. I need to meet first thing in the morning. The reply came almost instantly. 7 a.m. Be here. Good. Next, I made another call. Hello, this is Dr. Caldwell's office. I need a rush order on 2 DNA tests, I said. My voice was too steady, too cold. It didn't even sound like me. Of course. What's the urgency? I almost laughed. I just found out my wife is a liar. Silence. Then a professional but slightly softer tone. We can expedite results within 24 hours for an additional fee. Do it. After setting up the appointment for the next morning, I finally let myself breathe. Just for a second. Then I drove back. By the time I stepped inside, she was waiting for me in the kitchen, arms crossed, wine glass still in hand. She had changed into silk pajamas, looking like she didn't have a care in the world. "So, are we done with the dramatic exit?" she drawled. "Are you ready to talk like an adult?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, I'm more than ready to talk. But you? You should be worrying about what's coming next." She scoffed. "Oh, please. You're not doing anything. You're just mad. You'll yell, throw a tantrum, and in a few days you'll accept reality." "Reality," I echoed. "Reality is you're a cheat and a liar, and reality is about to bite you in the ass." She rolled her eyes. "Oh no, what are you going to do? Leave me? Give me a huge divorce settlement? Maybe fight for custody of kids that aren't even yours?" She smirked. "Go ahead. Make my day." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You think this is funny? I think it's pathetic," she said smoothly. "You're acting like you didn't need me, like I wasn't the best thing that ever happened to you." Something inside me burned white hot. I leaned in just enough for her to hear me clearly. "You're about to find out what happens when the best thing that ever happened to me turns out to be the worst mistake of my life." And for the first time that night, she had nothing to say. I barely slept that night. Not that I expected to. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow, deliberate way she breathed beside me like she had nothing to worry about. Like this was just another night, another argument, something she could brush off with time. She was wrong. At 5:30 a.m. I got up, showered, and dressed in silence. She stirred but didn't wake. I didn't say a word to her. What was there left to say? By 6:45, I was already in my car, parked outside my lawyer's office. At 6:59, I was at his door. At 7 a.m. sharp, it opened. "Come in," Thomas Sinclair said. No small talk, no pleasantries. He was the best for a reason. I stepped inside and he shut the door behind me. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the phone call, about what I overheard, about the kids, about how she had been planning this for God knows how long. He listened. He took notes. And when I was done, he leaned back in his chair, eyes sharp. "Well," he said, tapping his pen against the desk. "She screwed herself." I exhaled, some of the tension in my chest easing. "How?" "First of all, infidelity, especially if proven, can work in our favor. But the real problem for her is the kids." He laced his fingers together. "If a DNA test proves they aren't yours, you have no legal obligation to them. No child support. No custody battle. Nothing." I swallowed hard. The thought of walking away from them after everything was like a knife to the gut. But what choice did I have? "She thinks she's taking the house," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "She told her mom that." Sinclair smirked. "Not if I have anything to say about it." He leaned forward. "Tell me whose name is on the deed?" I already knew the answer. "Mine. Just mine." "Then she's got another problem." His smirk widened. "And I assume you bought that Tesla in your name, too?" I nodded. Well. He chuckled, shaking his head. "She really thought she had this all figured out, didn't she?" I clenched my jaw. "What do I do next?" "Two things. First, get those DNA tests done. We need hard proof. Second," he slid a document across the desk. "Sign this." I glanced down. "A formal request to freeze our joint bank account." "She doesn't know yet," I said. "That I've been here." "Good," Sinclair said. "Then let's keep it that way. If she's been planning to screw you over, I guarantee she's already been moving money around. This stops her from taking another cent." I didn't hesitate. I signed. By the time I left, I had a plan. At 8:30, I walked into the DNA testing clinic. The technician barely met my eyes as she took the samples, like she had seen this story too many times before. At 8:45, I paid extra for the 24-hour results. By 9 o'clock, I was back in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached. And then, for the first time since this nightmare started, I allowed myself to feel it. The betrayal. The rage. The grief. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, eyes burning. I had loved her. I had loved those kids. I had built my entire world around them. And it had all been a lie. But I wasn't the fool she thought I was. She thought she was playing a game. She had no idea I had just flipped the board. I pulled into the driveway just past 9:30. The house stood in front of me like nothing had changed, like it wasn't tainted with betrayal. But I had changed. And soon, this house wouldn't belong to her anymore. I stepped inside. She was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, sipping coffee like she didn't have a care in the world. She barely glanced at me. "Where'd you run off to so early?" I took a slow breath, locking every ounce of rage behind a mask of calm. "Had some things to take care of." She smirked, setting her mug down. Awfully secretive. I looked at her, really looked at her. How many times had I walked into this house thinking she was my partner? How many times had I kissed her, held her, trusted her, while she laughed behind my back? A familiar warmth curled in my chest. Not love, not sadness. Something colder. I stepped closer. "I was just thinking," I said slowly, "about how stupid you must think I am." That got her attention. Her smirk faltered just slightly. "Excuse me." I tilted my head. "How long did you think you could keep it up? A month? A year? Or were you just waiting until I really had nothing left before you twisted the knife?" She blinked. "Oh my God, are you still on about last night?" She groaned, rubbing her temple like I was exhausting her. "Jesus, you really need to let it go." "Let it go?" I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "You lied to me for years. You stole my time, my love, my life. And you want me to let it go?" She shrugged. "What else are you going to do? Yell at me? Cry? You're not leaving." I stared at her, stunned by the sheer audacity. She actually believed that. She actually thought I would stay. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. "Wow." She rolled her eyes. "You always overreact to everything. Honestly, this is why I took out my phone." She stopped. Her eyes flicked to the screen as I pulled up the confirmation email. I turned it toward her. "Bank account's frozen." Her face didn't change, but I saw it. The tightening around her mouth. The slight flicker of her gaze as she processed what that meant. I kept going. "I met with my lawyer this morning." She laughed, but it was forced. "Oh, please." I leaned forward. "Divorce papers are coming, sweetheart." That wiped the smirk right off her face. Her jaw clenched. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" "No," I said, voice even. "I think I'm done." She scoffed. "You can't just leave." I smiled, slow and sharp. "Watch me." And for the first time, I saw something new in her eyes. Fear. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. "Your DNA results are ready." A pulse of ice shot through my veins. I looked back up at her, and suddenly, I knew. This was the moment. The moment everything would break. I stood there, gripping my phone, the notification staring back at me like a loaded gun. "Your DNA results are ready." This was it. The moment of truth. The moment that would decide everything. My wife, or whatever the hell she was to me now, watched me carefully. She didn't know what had just landed in my inbox, but she knew it wasn't good for her. The way her body tensed, the way her fingers curled slightly on the counter. It was the first real sign of unease I had seen from her. I said nothing. I just tapped the email open. 2 PDF attachments. One for my son. One for my daughter. My fingers hovered over the first one. A deep breath. Then I opened it. A single line of text burned into my vision. Probability of paternity. 0%. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might actually be sick. I blinked. Read it again. 0. There was no probably not, no low chance. Just a cold, scientific 0. The second attachment was already open before I could think. Probability of paternity. 0%. I stared at it, feeling something inside me shatter into a million pieces. It wasn't just one mistake. It wasn't just one lapse in judgment. She had built our entire life, our family, on a lie. My fingers tightened around the phone as I finally looked up. She was watching me, still trying to play it cool. But I could see the cracks. The way her lips pressed too tightly together. The way her fingers twitched ever so slightly on the counter. She didn't know the results yet, but she knew. I exhaled slowly. "You have one chance." Her brows lifted. "One chance for what?" "To tell me the truth." My voice came out too calm, too steady, like I wasn't standing in the ruins of my entire goddamn life. She scoffed, crossing her arms. I don't owe you anything. I let out a low, humorless chuckle. You don't owe me? My voice hardened. I gave you everything. I gave you a house, a car, my time, my love, my life. And you, I held up my phone, shaking it slightly. Gave me nothing. Her eyes flickered to the screen. She didn't even try to fake confusion. She knew. And she didn't look shocked. She didn't look sorry. She just exhaled through her nose like I was being inconvenient. You really had to go and do that, huh? She muttered. A sharp, bitter laugh shot out of me. Wow. Wow. That's your reaction. She rolled her eyes. What do you want me to say? That I regret it? That I'm so sorry? Would that even change anything? I stared at her, my blood running hot and cold at the same time. So, that's it? No guilt, no remorse, nothing? She tilted her head, considering. Not really. For a second, I couldn't even move. The level of callousness, the sheer emptiness in her voice, it was unreal. She sighed, tapping her nails against the counter. Look, you were never him. You know? The one I wanted. The room suddenly felt too small. Too hot. I clenched my jaw. Who? Her lips curled into something almost smug. Oh, does it matter? She threw my own words back at me like a weapon. I mean, it's more than one guy. So really, do you want a list? Something in my chest snapped. I slammed my phone onto the counter so hard she jumped. She laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, come on. Don't act so shocked. Shocked? My voice came out low, dangerous. No. I think I always knew. I was just too stupid to admit it. She shrugged, sipping her coffee like we were talking about the weather. And that's when I knew. There was no saving this. No fixing this. This woman, this stranger in my house, had been planning to burn my life down for years. I just happened to catch the match before she could drop it. I exhaled, steadying myself. Then I picked up my phone, grabbed my keys, and turned for the door. She frowned. Where the hell are you going? I didn't look back. To end this. And this time, I wasn't coming back. I didn't stop driving until I reached my lawyer's office. The morning rush had started, people hurrying to work, grabbing coffee, living their normal, uncomplicated lives. I sat there in traffic, gripping the wheel, feeling like I had been thrown into some alternate reality where everything I thought was real had been a joke. A twisted, elaborate joke at my expense. By the time I walked into Thomas Sinclair's office, I was running on pure adrenaline. He looked up from his desk, took one glance at my face, and nodded. Let me guess, he said. You got the results. I dropped my phone onto his desk. 0%. He exhaled through his nose, flipping the phone over. Both of them. I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. He leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers together. All right. That changes things. I swallowed. How? Sinclair studied me for a moment before grabbing a folder from his desk and sliding it toward me. First, let's talk divorce. I opened it. Inside were the preliminary documents, petitions, financial disclosures, asset division paperwork. He had already started everything before I even walked in this morning. This is our advantage, he continued. You file first. You control the narrative. She thinks she's taking the house, but she's dead wrong. Your name is the only one on that deed, and now that we know those kids aren't yours, that's one less bargaining chip she has. I stared at the papers. My hands didn't shake. They should have, but they didn't. Sign them, Sinclair said. The sooner we serve her, the better. I picked up the pen. There was no hesitation. No second-guessing. Just a signature. A clean, sharp cut between the past and the future. Sinclair gave a satisfied nod. Now about custody. My stomach twisted. There is no custody. They aren't mine. He watched me carefully. Legally, no. Biologically, no. But emotionally, I clenched my fists. That was the thing, wasn't it? The part that was going to gut me. I had been their dad for years. I had fed them, held them when they cried, kissed their bruises, taught them how to ride their bikes. I had spent birthdays planning perfect surprises, thinking I was building memories they'd carry forever. And now in one email, in one line of text, that was all gone. But was it? Sinclair sighed, flipping through his notes. The law is tricky here. If we argue that you were the presumed father, meaning you acted as their dad and they recognize you as such, she could push for child support. He glanced at me. Do you think she will? I almost laughed. She'd take my organs if she could. He nodded. Then we'll need to get ahead of it. We petition for official disestablishment of paternity. I swallowed hard. And that means? It means you legally sever all ties to them. He said it like it was just another case, another routine procedure. To him, maybe it was. To me, it felt like cutting off my own arm. I exhaled, my vision blurring slightly. And if I don't? Then she will come for child support, he said bluntly. And she'll get it. My blood went cold. Not because of the money. Because of what it meant. If I didn't fight this now, if I let this sit, I'd be paying her for the next decade or more. Not for my kids. Her kids. Kids she had with God knows who. And every month, every paycheck, I'd be sending her a reminder that she had one. I gritted my teeth. Violet, you're sure? I wasn't sure about anything anymore. But I knew one thing, if I let her take anything from me after this, she would never stop. Violet, I said again, stronger this time. Sinclair nodded and made a note. It's done. I ran a hand over my face, exhaling slowly. So what now? Now, he said, sliding another document toward me, we serve her. I looked down. A formal notice of divorce. A legal petition for disestablishment of paternity. A freezing of all marital assets. It was everything she wasn't expecting. I looked back up at him. How fast can we do it? He smirked. By tonight. I clenched my jaw. Do it. And just like that, the war officially began. I pulled into the driveway just as the sun was beginning to set. The house stood there, the same as it always had, pristine, welcoming, ours. Except it wasn't ours anymore. It had never been ours. It had been mine. And soon it would be mine again. I stepped out of the car, my mind buzzing with everything I had just set in motion. The divorce papers were filed. The petition to sever my ties to the kids had been submitted. My lawyer had arranged for a professional process server to deliver the documents to my wife tonight. By the time she realized what was happening, it would already be done. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The first thing I heard was laughter. Not hers. The laugh was deep, masculine, coming from the living room. I felt my stomach twist as I followed the sound, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. And then I saw him, a man, sitting on my couch, drinking a beer like he belonged there. And across from him, my wife, sitting with one leg tucked under her, looking relaxed, smiling. I stood there for a moment, taking it in. The audacity, the sheer, unbelievable audacity. She wasn't even waiting. She wasn't even pretending to feel guilty. The guy noticed me first. His eyes flicked up, casual at first, then slightly wary when he saw the look on my face. My wife turned next, her expression shifting, surprise, then mild annoyance. Oh, she said, like I had just interrupted a casual conversation. You're home early. I didn't respond. My hands clenched at my sides as I forced myself to stay calm. She tilted her head, eyes scanning me. What's with the look? You jealous or something? I exhaled sharply through my nose. You have some nerve. She smirked. Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. She gestured lazily toward the man on the couch. This is Evan. He's a friend. Evan. I looked at him. He looked at me. Neither of us spoke. I took a slow, deliberate step forward. Let me guess, I said, my voice ice cold. You're one of the many, aren't you? Evan had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. Look, man, I held up a hand. I don't care. My wife sighed heavily. God, this again? Haven't we been through this already? I laughed. Actually laughed. She thought this was over. She thought we were still playing whatever sick game she had been running for years. She had no idea that I had already flipped the table. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. Her eyes narrowed. What's that? I tossed it onto the coffee table. The papers slid out slightly, the words petition for dissolution of marriage visible in bold at the top. Her smirk vanished. I crossed my arms. Consider yourself served. The room fell into silence. She stared at the papers like they weren't real, like they were some kind of trick. Then, slowly, she reached forward and picked them up, flipping through the pages. Her expression darkened. What the hell is this? She snapped. I leaned forward. Divorce. Asset freeze. Oh, and a legal disestablishment of paternity. I smiled, sharp and humorless. You know what that means, don't you? She looked up at me, something like panic flickering in her eyes. You can't, I interrupted. And I did. Those kids? Not mine. You? Not my problem anymore. Her breathing quickened. You don't mean that. I didn't respond. I just watched as it sank in. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't some argument she could twist in her favor. This was the end. Her fingers clenched the papers. You're being insane right now, she said, her voice rising. You can't just walk away, watch me. She gaped at me, furious, losing control. And then, as if remembering she wasn't alone, she turned to Evan. Do you see what I've had to deal with? She said, her voice pitching higher. He's crazy. He's always been controlling. Evan shifted uncomfortably. I should probably go. She whipped toward him. What? He stood up, setting his beer down. Yeah, this seems like a you problem. Her face twisted in outrage. Are you kidding me? I almost laughed again. She thought she was going to have someone to back her up. She thought Evan, just one of many apparently, was going to stand beside her and fight her battles. But no, even he wasn't stupid enough to stick around for this. He gave me one last glance, part awkward, part relieved, then quickly walked past me and out the door. I turned back to her. She was breathing hard, gripping the divorce papers so tightly her knuckles were white. You're making a mistake, she hissed. I met her gaze, calm and steady. No, the mistake was ever trusting you. Her nostrils flared. You'll regret this. No, I said, stepping toward the door. You will. And with that, I walked out. This time, for good. I didn't look back as I walked out that door. Not at her. Not at the house. Not at the life I had spent years building, only to find out it had been a lie from the start. I got into my car, hands steady, heart pounding, and just drove. Not to a bar. Not to a friend's place. I didn't even know where I was going at first. I just needed to be away. Somewhere between leaving the house and the sun dipping lower in the sky, I ended up at a park. It wasn't a place I had ever spent much time in, but I pulled into an empty parking spot, killed the engine, and sat there, staring at nothing. Everything was hitting me all at once now. The divorce was filed. The bank accounts were frozen. The paternity was legally severed. I had officially set fire to every single bridge that connected me to her. And yet, sitting there in that silent car, something inside me still ached. Not for her. Never for her. But for them. The kids. I leaned back in my seat, exhaling shakily. They weren't mine. Not biologically. But they were mine in every way that had ever mattered, at least they had been. And now, I was going to disappear from their lives just as fast as I had entered them. Did they even know? Had she told them yet? Would she? Would they ever wonder where I went? Would they ask why? Or would she twist the truth like she had twisted everything else, warping reality until they believed that I was the one who had abandoned them? I ran a hand over my face, my jaw clenching. It didn't matter. I couldn't change the truth. And the truth was that those kids were never really mine to begin with. I swallowed hard, reaching for my phone. I didn't even know what I was planning to do. Maybe just check my messages. Maybe distract myself with anything other than the growing hollow feeling in my chest. But the moment I turned on the screen, I saw her name. A text. I almost didn't open it. Almost deleted it on sight. But curiosity won. Her, you're seriously doing this? You're actually leaving? I stared at the message, feeling the familiar burn of anger creeping up my spine. Not sorry. Not I messed up. Not how do we fix this? Just are you really leaving? Like I was the problem. Like I was the one who had done something wrong. I exhaled slowly and typed back. Me, I already left. You just didn't notice until now. Her response came almost instantly. Her, you're being dramatic. Just come home and we'll talk about this. I laughed bitterly. She still didn't get it. She still thought I was negotiable. I typed again. Me, we're past talking. We were past talking the moment you opened your mouth last night. You planned this for years. You thought I'd never figure it out. Well, guess what? I did. And now you get to live with it. There was a long pause. Then another message. Her, you'll regret this. I shook my head, my grip tightening on the phone. That was her last move. Her final play. She couldn't lie her way out of this. She couldn't manipulate me anymore. So now all she had left was threats. I took a deep breath and sent my final message. Me, no. But you will. Then I blocked her number. And just like that, she was gone. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter than I had in years. Not better. Not fixed. Just lighter. Like I had finally cut off a weight I hadn't even realized had been dragging me down. I had spent the night in a hotel. Some mid-range place with stiff pillows and a forgettable breakfast. But it didn't matter. It wasn't about where I was. It was about where I wasn't. I wasn't in that house. I wasn't under the same roof as her. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't pretending everything was fine. I checked my phone out of habit, half expecting more texts from her. Maybe even some fake apologies now that the reality of the divorce was sinking in. But there was nothing. She was still blocked. And even if she wasn't, I doubted she'd apologize. She didn't do regret. But someone else had texted me. Sinclair, she's lawyered up. She's fighting the disestablishment of paternity. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. Of course, she was. She had lost control, so now she was trying to grab onto whatever scraps of power she had left. I typed back, "Me, what's the play?" His response was almost instant. "Sinclair, simple. We make sure she loses everything." I let that sink in. It wasn't even about revenge at this point. It was about making sure she didn't win. Because if she won, if she got the house, if she got my money, if she got a single cent of child support for kids that weren't even mine, it would be like saying she was right. That she could cheat, lie, manipulate, and still come out ahead. And I refused to let that happen. I left the hotel at noon and drove straight to Sinclair's office. He had already drafted a response to her challenge. "She thinks she can argue emotional attachment," he explained, flipping through the paperwork. "That you acted as their father, and therefore you should still be legally responsible for them." I clenched my jaw. "She wants my money." He nodded. "Exactly." I exhaled through my nose. "So, how do we make sure she gets nothing?" Sinclair smirked, tapping the papers. "We counter with fraud." I blinked. "Fraud? She knowingly passed off another man's children as yours," he said, leaning back in his chair. "For years. That's deception. That's intent. If we frame it right, we don't just sever paternity. We make her financially liable for trying to defraud you." I stared at him. I had expected a fight. I had expected a long, drawn-out legal battle where she dragged me through the mud, played the victim, tried to milk me for every last dollar. But I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected an actual win. "She pays me?" I asked, still processing. "If the judge agrees?" "Yes." Sinclair smiled. "And trust me, with the right strategy, they will." For the first time in weeks, I let out a real breath. She wasn't just going to lose. She was going to pay for what she did. The court process took months. She fought, of course. She screamed, played the victim, acted like I was the monster for trying to leave. But the evidence was airtight. The DNA tests, the recorded phone call, the financial records showing how she had been funneling money into her personal accounts long before I caught her. It wasn't just infidelity. It was calculated. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. The paternity was severed. The house stayed mine. And she was ordered to pay damages for fraudulent misrepresentation of paternity. I walked out of that courtroom free. Months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she had moved out of the state. She had lost everything. Her comfortable life, her free ride, even Evan or whatever his name was. I didn't care where she went. She wasn't my problem anymore. I still think about the kids sometimes. I wonder if they miss me. If they ask about me. If she told them the truth, or if she twisted the story until I became the villain. But the truth is, I couldn't save them from her. All I could do was save myself. And that was exactly what I did.